I'll never forget the sound it made. Metal clicking shut like a door slamming on Freedom brand new padlock hanging off my family's timber bridge like somebody had just claimed the air we breathe and taped across it, bold as arrogance itself, a notice. Emergency closure by order of the association. Yeah, that happened. And if you've never watched strangers try to lock you out of land your grandfather built with his own hands, trust me, it does something permanent to your spine. There's only one road in and out of our valley. You see, crosses the creek on a timber span my grandfather built after coming home from the war. Calloused hands, stubborn optimism, neighbors helping plank by plank, because back then land meant community, not control. When he passed, the deed went to my dad, and when Dad died, it came to me, faded paper, leather folder, but heavier than steel. That bridge isn't vacation scenery, it's family history, responsibility, identity, you know what I mean? So when I saw that lock, neighbors gathering behind me worrying about missed work shifts, medications, kids stuck without school buses, and then the sheriff rolled up with 3 HOA board members clutching clipboards like they were badges, I knew this wasn't about safety. It was about power. Mara, HOA vice president, sunglasses in the shade, rehearsed smile, told me the bridge was common area, now temporary takeover for safety remediation. Said any attempt to bypass the lock meant $500 daily fines. $500 a day for crossing my own bridge. I didn't yell. That's not my style. Paperwork is. I photographed everything, lock, notice, clipboard heading. Chain of custody starts with documentation. If you can't prove it, it didn't happen. Let me back up a sec. HOAs have authority, sure, but only inside recorded plats. The legal boundaries filed with the county. Paint colors, trash bins, maybe where you park your boat, but they don't get to rewrite deeds. A deed beats a handbook every time. Always has. That night I barely slept. Dug out the old cedar trunk that's followed our family for decades, smelled like dust, pine, history. First thing I pulled was the 1948 warranty deed, notary seal still proud. Fee simple forever, it said, including the timber span across the creek. Then the 1951 county bridge permit, hand-drawn schematics in my grandfather's careful script, and a 1973 survey map showing parcel 14B, the narrow strip that includes the bridge, never part of the HOA plat. Never offered. Never accepted. Legally ours. But here's where it gets interesting, twist I didn't even know existed. Tucked inside a plastic sleeve was a 1992 license my father drafted. He'd allowed neighbors to cross as a courtesy, not an easement, a revocable license. And in a rider I'd never read before, a reversion clause. If anyone tried to claim control or ownership, the license automatically suspended access, snapped back entirely to us until the interference stopped. Meaning that padlock, it didn't give them power. It erased their access. Yeah, irony can be poetic. Still, they doubled down. Fake structural hazard memo with no engineer stamp, violation letters citing the wrong parcel number, mass emails scaring residents into funding a bridge takeover. Fear sells authority, apparently. But precision beats fear. So I built my file, deeds, permits, tax rolls showing we paid property taxes on that bridge parcel every year. Even requested HOA meeting minutes. Buried inside? A note about bringing the bridge under control so outsider cabins can't avoid obligations. Not safety. Control. That's when I called James Callahan, property attorney, gray hair, calm voice. He said something I've repeated ever since. We don't shout. We notice. His plan was surgical. Demand proof of jurisdiction, notify county officials, prepare a restraining order if needed. And he pointed out another detail I'd missed. The HOA gate post? 2 feet inside my parcel. Not just interference, encroachment. So I sent a certified cure or quit letter 10 days to remove their hardware or all access privileges suspended under Dad's license. And in daylight, toolbox in hand, I removed their chain. Hung my own modest lock, posted a laminated protocol sign. Access allowed with permission, log sheet required, emergency responders unrestricted. That part mattered. Permission prevents prescriptive easements, squatters' rights for access. Documentation protects generosity from turning into theft. Neighbors signed politely. Some grumbled. But things stayed calm until one evening red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Sheriff again, county road inspector this time. They unfolded the parcel map on a truck hood, finger traced the line, and just like that, private bridge. Price family since 1948. Not county. Not HOA. Sheriff looked straight at the board. If you don't own it, you don't lock it. You want control, go to civil court. Another lock here becomes trespass. That was the first crack in their authority. Then came the community meeting, packed room, fluorescent lights buzzing, frustration thick. Mara presented a glossy safety report, with no engineering stamp. I countered with county permits, independent inspection letter, timeline of their actions. Testimonials followed, missed medication pickups, lost wages, delayed paramedics. Silence got heavy real quick. And then the real bombshell, former HOA treasurer stood up holding financial records. Line item, bridge control vendor services, $4,200. Vendor? Shell company. No license. Just a P.O. box. Dues money possibly funneled somewhere shady. That's when trust collapsed entirely. Court day arrived faster than expected. Small courtroom, old carpet smell, tension electric. Judge asked one question. Show me the recorded right for the HOA. They had a handbook. We had deeds, permits, tax rolls. Judge didn't even touch their binder. Handbooks do not control real property. Deeds do. Temporary restraining order granted. HOA barred from interference. Damages hearing scheduled next. Quiet vindication, not triumph, just relief. Settlement followed. All fines rescinded, legal fees paid, written apology issued. New policy recorded with the county. No HOA authority beyond recorded common areas without documented interest. Emergency access protections standardized across the community. Paper safeguards for future boards. You'd think that'd be the end, right? Nice tidy ending, cue the sunset. Mostly it was. Valley got quiet again. Neighbors crossing freely. Bridge solid under morning light, creek running gold beneath it. I walked across one day thinking about my grandfather, my dad, how ownership isn't dominance, it's stewardship. Keeping things open, safe, honest. But here's the kicker. At a barbecue, a local realtor whispered another HOA upstream was already discussing standardized crossing control. Apparently our fight made waves. Control spreads faster than common sense sometimes. And just last week the county clerk texted me again. Another filing about my creek from a different association. Storm clouds upstream, maybe. So yeah, we won this round. Bridge is open, records clear, accountability finally written in ink. That part feels good, I won't pretend otherwise. But it raises a question I keep coming back to, and honestly I'd love your take. When organizations meant to serve communities start chasing control, instead where exactly should the line be drawn, and who should hold it? Drop your thoughts, your experiences, even your disagreements down below, because stories like this don't stay isolated. And if you've ever dealt with HOA overreach, property disputes, or just watched power get a little too comfortable, share it. Somebody else out there probably needs to hear it. You'd think after a judge drops the gavel and says, handbooks do not control real property, everybody packs up their ego and goes home, right? That's what I thought too. For about 3 weeks. 3 quiet, almost suspiciously peaceful weeks. The creek kept running like it always had. The bridge creaked under tires and boots. Neighbors signed the log out of habit, even though technically they didn't have to anymore. It had become less about enforcement and more about respect. Mara stayed quiet. The board reshuffled. 2 members resigned to spend more time with family, which is HOA code for this got too expensive, and I'm not taking the fall. Callahan and I finalized the settlement documents. Fees paid. Apology recorded. Policy amendment stamped at the county clerk's office, so no future board could pretend ignorance. It felt done. But here's the thing about power, it doesn't like losing. One afternoon I was walking the length of the bridge, checking bolts like I do every season, when my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Johnson. Daniel, she said, voice tight, there's a man out here taking measurements near the upstream bend. Says he's with Valley Crossings Initiative. That name alone made my stomach twist. Valley Crossings Initiative. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? Like a community beautification project. Maybe a brochure with smiling families and golden retrievers. It wasn't. By that evening, I had 3 emails forwarded to me. Apparently an upstream HOA, newer development, deeper pockets, had hired a consultant to evaluate all non-standard access points in the valley for safety harmonization. Safety harmonization. That's corporate for we want control, without saying we want control. Let me back up a sec. When our subdivision was first carved out decades ago, the valley wasn't uniform. Some parcels were older ranch splits, some were newer planned communities with CCNRs. My bridge sat at a choke point, a practical crossing that predated most of the developments. which meant anyone upstream who wanted convenient access used it. And most had been fine with that for years, until our little court fight made headlines in the county circular. Now suddenly the phrase independent crossings was being framed as a liability risk. You know what that smells like? Insurance pressure, developer influence, centralized authority. So I did what I always do, I noticed. Pulled the new filings from the clerk's online index. Sure enough, Valley Crossings Initiative had filed a notice of intent to explore easement consolidation. Not a claim yet, just an exploration. That's how these things start. First, they gather data. Then they commission reports. Then they circulate fear. Within days, glossy mailers hit upstream mailboxes. I managed to get my hands on one. It showed dramatic photos of washed-out culverts from floods in other counties, bold red captions. Is your access safe? Not one of those photos was from our creek. Fear Marketing 101. The twist, the part one didn't expect, came from someone I thought would stay neutral. The county road inspector who'd sided with me during the first showdown. He called me. Daniel, he said carefully, there's talk at council level about standardizing emergency response routes. Nothing official, but they're being pitched on the idea that fragmented private crossings complicate dispatch. I leaned back in my chair and just stared at the wall. So now it wasn't just HOA ego. It was bureaucratic convenience. Different animal entirely. Convenience is seductive. It dresses up as efficiency, and sometimes it bulldozes nuance. Are they talking about condemnation? I asked. Not yet, he replied. But feasibility studies are being floated. Condemnation. That word carries weight. Eminent domain. Government taking private property for public use with compensation. Different battlefield. Callahan didn't flinch when I told him. They'd have to prove necessity, he said calmly. And compensation wouldn't just be timber value. It would account for control, liability, history. But don't borrow trouble yet. So we watched. And sure enough, Valley Crossings hosted a community safety forum at their clubhouse. I went. Sat in the back. Didn't speak at first. Presenter clicked through slides about uniform governance, centralized oversight, and risk mitigation. Every other slide subtly implied private owners were weak links in the chain. Then they opened the floor for questions. A man in a polo shirt asked, would consolidation reduce our insurance premiums? There it was. Not safety. Money. I stood up slowly. My name's Daniel Price, I said. Owner of Parcel 14B, the bridge you're referencing. You could feel the air shift. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. Just laid out facts. This crossing has county permits dating back to 1951. Independently inspected. Taxed separately. No recorded easements granted. The last attempt at control ended in court. Murmurs. Then I asked one question. If centralization is about safety, why hasn't anyone requested cooperative inspection agreements instead of control? Silence. Because cooperation doesn't generate authority. Authority generates dues, leverage, compliance. After the meeting, something unexpected happened. A developer, one of the original architects of the upstream subdivision, pulled me aside. I built that place 20 years ago, he said quietly. We never intended to absorb private crossings. But newer board members think bigger jurisdiction equals higher property values. He shook his head. Be careful. They're under pressure from an insurance carrier who hates exceptions. That was the missing piece. Insurance companies don't like irregularity. Irregularity means unpredictability. Unpredictability means risk modeling headaches. So what started as HOA overreach was morphing into systemic tidying. The problem? Land isn't a spreadsheet. History doesn't flatten neatly into a risk matrix. Over the next month, feasibility discussions stayed theoretical. No formal motions. No condemnation filings. Just murmurs. And here's the part that surprised even me. Neighbors from both sides of the creek began reaching out. Not to fight, to collaborate. Mrs. Johnson suggested a joint maintenance cooperative, shared inspection schedule, cost transparency, emergency protocol standardization without ownership transfer. Mr. Miller volunteered his welding skills for reinforcement brackets if ever needed. Instead of central control, the community floated decentralized cooperation. That idea spread faster than fear. When Valley Crossings finally drafted a proposal, it wasn't a takeover. It was a memorandum of understanding, voluntary inspection sharing, open data on structural reports, unified emergency signage standards. No deed transfers. No easement grabs. Just coordination. Callahan read it twice and nodded. See? You forced the conversation out of shadows. And that's when it really hit me. The first fight wasn't about wood and nails. The second wasn't either. They were about narrative. If you let someone define you as reckless, unsafe, obstructionist, you're already losing. But if you document, cooperate transparently, and stay calm while they escalate, eventually the spotlight shifts. The bridge still stands, still creaks, still belongs to my family. But now it also stands as precedent. Not just legally, culturally. It showed that quiet documentation beats loud posturing. That stewardship can coexist with community. That no doesn't have to mean isolation. It can mean not like that. And maybe the biggest lesson? Power expands until it meets resistance. Not rage. Not sabotage. Resistance backed by record. So now I'll ask you something. If you own something rooted in your family's history, something legally yours, but practically shared, how far would you go to defend it? Would you compromise early for peace? Would you fight every inch? Or would you try to reshape the battlefield entirely like we did? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The next time someone locks a gate somewhere in this valley, it won't just be about timber. It'll be about whether we learned anything. And I'd genuinely like to hear your take. What's the right balance between private ownership and collective oversight? Drop your thoughts, especially if you've lived through something similar. Because stories like this, they don't end with one bridge. They ripple.